In this video, you're going to be wiring up the weather endpoint. We have the endpoint created, and we already have the code written to geocode an address and get the forecast from the geocoding output. We're going to put all of that together to actually finalize this endpoint. Now, the first thing we're going to do is copy some of the files from the weather app project over to the new folder. We already wrote great code for geocoding and for fetching a forecast, and we're going to repurpose it. So right here, I'm going to open up the Finder on my machine. I'm going to go into the node course directory, and from the weather app project, we're going to grab the entire utils folder. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. That's going to be our 2 JavaScript files, which we're going to need, and we're going to bring those over to the web server project. I'm going to paste the utilities folder right inside of the source directory. So in here, I'll paste the item adding the utils folder inside of there. So now we have the utils directory in our project, the one we're working on, and we can use both forecast and geocode inside of there. Now, if you remember, those 2 files, they took advantage of the npm request module. We're going to have to make sure we have that installed, and currently it is not installed in web server. So down below, I can just shut down nodemon using Control-C and install it. npm I request at 2.88.0. I'm going to go ahead and fire that command off to install request in the web server project. And once it is installed, I'll just cycle through the previous commands using the up arrow and then restart nodemon exactly like we had it before. Now we can use both geocode and forecast inside of our callback right here to get the correct forecast information sent back. Inside of the weather app project, in app.js, we had an example of what this took, and we used the nested callback pattern. So right here, we used geocode, then we went down to use forecast. Now, the first thing we did is we actually checked if there was an address or not, and we already have code that gets that done in place. We already have an if statement up above that makes sure the address exists, which means that down below, right here, we can start the process of calling geocode, which is the first thing we do inside of else. Now, obviously, we can't console.log results to get them back to the requester. Instead, we're going to be using response.send to send those results back. In the case of an error for either geocode or forecast, we'll send back an object with the error property, providing the message as the value for that property. And if we get all the way to the end and things go well, we'll send back an object like this one, though instead of having location and forecast data dumped to the terminal, they would be added on to the object we send as the response. So console.log calls get replaced with calls to response.send since we're working inside of our express route handler. Now, actually getting this done is going to be your challenge for the video. You know how to do it. We've gone through all of the necessary steps before, and down below I have some challenge comments just to make sure we're all headed in the right direction. So goal, wire up /weather. Right now it's sending back dummy data. We want to make sure it can send back real forecast data based off of the address provided as part of the query string. Step 1. You're going to have to load in both of those functions into this file, and that's going to be easy to do since the utils folder has been copied to this project. Next up, you're going to actually geocode the address to get the coordinates. If something goes wrong, send back the error. If things go well, you're going to use those coordinates to get the forecast. If something goes wrong when getting the forecast, send back an error. If things go well, you're going to send back an object that looks exactly like this, but with a real forecast string, the actual location that was used, and address which will stay the same. Now, when you're done, you want to test things out. Visiting a URL like this one, where address equals Boston, should result in a real forecast string and a real location showing up. Then switch it up, picking a different location, maybe a location like your current one, and make sure you see the forecast you're currently experiencing where you are. Take as much time as you need to knock this out. Feel free to refer back to the code we wrote before to chain these 2 callbacks together. When you're done, test your work, then come back and click play. How'd you do? Let's go ahead and kick things off with step number 1. We're going to load in the functions that we're going to need. So up above at the very top of the file, I'm going to use require a couple of times to grab those two functions, and I'll go ahead and kick things off by grabbing geocode first, though the order isn't important. So geocode is the function I'm going to grab. I'm going to get it as the return value from require, and I'm going to load in my local file ./utils/geocode. Next up, we have the forecast function. So right here, I'll define that, and I'll use require to load that file in ./utils/forecast. Now that we have both of those functions available, we're ready to actually use them in the route handlers down below. I said handlers plural, there's only just one, and it is the one right here. For the moment, I'm going to comment out our old call to response.send. I'm going to leave it in place just so we can remember which properties we're supposed to send back, though I'll actually recreate it when I write my code for steps 2 and 3. Step 2 is to use the address to geocode, so right here we are going to call the geocode function, and I am going to pass the address in, request.query.address. Now, if you remember, geocode takes in 2 arguments. The second is our callback function. And if you forgot exactly how anything worked, you were allowed to crack open those files to jog your memory. In this case, we get 2 potential arguments. We either have the error message as a string, or we have our data as an object. Now, when we had learned about destructuring, we actually destructured that object, creating individual variables for the properties. We did that in app.js inside of the weather app project. I'm going to do that right here as well. So I'm going to destructure latitude off of there. I'm also going to do the same for longitude. And finally, I'll do the same for location. Now down below, the first thing we want to do is check if there was an error. If there was an error, we don't want to go on to run the forecast function because it's not going to work. Instead, I'll use return along with response.send to wrap things up. We're going to send back an object with an error property, and the value for that is going to be a variable with the same name. So this is a great use case for the shorthand. Perfect. Now, maybe you didn't use the shorthand or you didn't put it on one line. That's fine as well. At that point, we're talking about differences in syntax preference. Down below, after that if statement, we know that geocoding went well, and it is time to actually call forecast. So I'm going to call the forecast function, passing in the 3 arguments it needs. The first being the latitude, the second being the longitude, and the third being a callback function. We're going to have the error, and if we don't have the error, then we'll have our forecast data. I'm going to set up variables for both of those. Excellent. Now we can actually set up an error handler for forecast. If there is an error, that's okay. We're going to stop the function, and we'll use response.send to send it back. Excellent. Now, right here, this code only runs if everything went well, and we're going to work on sending back the object using the same structure we had below. So response.send, I'm going to send back an object with a forecast property. The value will come from the forecast data variable up above. Next up, we have the location property. There's a variable with that name, and that's where we're going to get the value, so we can use the shorthand right here for that. Next up, the last property is address, and that value comes from request.query.address. Perfect. Now that we have all of this in place, I can remove the commented out call from before. I'm also going to remove the challenge comments, as the only thing left to do is test our work. Then I'm actually going to test our work by saving the file and refreshing things in the browser. Over here, I'm seeing my static output for forecast and location. Now I am searching for Boston, so let's refresh the page and see what happens. Right here, I'm getting the weather for the following location: Boston, Mass. In the United States. I have the input and I have my forecast. Partly cloudy starting in the evening. It's currently 29 degrees out and there is a 0% chance of rain. So there we go. We now have the finalized endpoint that takes in an address and sends the forecast data back. From here, we're going to actually wire that up in the web app. So we have the input field and we show the forecast on the screen here as a nice rendered HTML page. as opposed to the format it comes in, which is JSON. That's where we're gonna stop for this one, and don't worry, you're gonna get a ton more experience creating JSON-based endpoints throughout the class. We're gonna work on a major project with database storage and authentication a bit later. This is just an introduction to the idea of Express, routes, JSON, and asynchronous development. All right, that's where we're gonna stop for this video. In the next one, we're gonna continue on integrating this URL into our web application.